strategic thinking in the brand building and clarify messages, visuals to establish a brand that can grow with meaning and purpose. And I've been in the field for over 20 years, and I'm originally from France, went through Atlanta, New York, and now Salt Lake City.
Awesome. Thanks, Priscilla.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I'm up next. Thank you, everyone. So I'm Theodore. I'm from Espiritu, a industrial design and product development consultancy in downtown Salt Lake City. We develop a variety of technologies in different product categories for a number of clients, such as Easton, U.S. Air Force, Pfizer, and so on. But essentially, we develop new technology and prepare them for commercialization.
Awesome.
Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, so I've started the recording, and I'll introduce Spencer Walker, who is our weekly expert. I'll just basically tell you his name and a little bit about what he does. And I'll let him give you some more background. So Spencer and I actually have worked together for quite a few years and up at the University of Utah, and he's managed a lot of the new programs up there on the new ventures side. But Spencer, will you give a little bit more of your background and share a little bit about maybe some of the accelerator cohorts that you've run?
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Hey, everyone. I've been up at Pivot, formerly known as TVC, formerly known as TCO, but I guess the important takeaway from that is it's the tech transfer office at the University of Utah. So transitioning technology developed in labs out into the market. And my team specifically does that through creating startups. And oftentimes the inventor wants to be a part of that somehow. And so we didn't create a lot of the content, but the delivery is what we've created. The content was created by National Science Foundation called I-Core. It's their I-Core program. And it's a way to teach inventors, researchers, people who come from a strong technical background to give a common vernacular around startups. And what are some of these common terms that for I think a lot of us today, they'll be pretty familiar, but you may or may not be surprised that to most of the world, these are not familiar terms or concepts. And so we take them through a cohort over 7 or 8 weeks and teach them these and actually turn them out to the sharks, out to the public, and they need to go out and validate or invalidate certain assumptions that they have about their technologies and how they might fit into a product and how that product might fit into a startup. So let me jump in with a presentation. Are you seeing just what is a startup? Okay, awesome. Making sure I got the right thing. So again, this is super basic, but if you're not in the world of startups, it's not so basic. The idea that a startup is not a company, it's a temporary vehicle in order to validate that your product has a fit in a market and that it is something that can be repeatable and scalable. As soon as you've done that, you now have or what could be a company. And these aren't my words, these are words from Steve Blank. He's kind of the father of this, one of the fathers of this lean startup methodology. So if you dig a little deeper into the idea of a business model as we teach it is the elements of a strategy necessary to deliver a product to a customer and make money from it. So the business model describes the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value and we're typically talking about delivering and creating value in economic terms, although quite a few of the researchers that we work with are very interested in delivering social or cultural value, and that's great. But in order for a startup to move into a company, there does need to be, a revenue stream. And so in other words, the business model is how a company creates value for itself while delivering, those products and services. Not new to you on the call today, but it's revolutionary for other people. So what are the elements that go into and compose the business model? These are the ones that we teach. And if you're familiar with the business model canvas, they're organized in such a way that it's easy to understand. This comes out of a great book called The Business Model Generation. And at the end of my deck, I've got some links and things so you can just get right to them. But there are some of these elements kind of work together. And the takeaway for us as we lead these cohorts and what we want to convey to our audience is these are all guesses in the beginning. And we don't want to discount how smart an inventor is or how smart any of us are and how well we might know a product or service, or we've worked in an industry for years and years and years. If we're looking to try something new or to present our technology inside of a product to a new customer, even the best educated person is still going to have some elements here that need to be validated. And I think for today, the focus, as Taylor explained it, and it's the focus that we start with in our cohorts, is there are two essential elements that really need to be nailed down before you spend time looking at the other areas. All 9 of the elements are important. These 2 are foundational. And so one of the first questions, or items that comes up is, an inventor, or let's say an entrepreneur, confusing value proposition with their product or service. So all of their assumptions around value proposition are very feature driven, and what we teach is first understand who you're building for and how it solves a problem for them. And beyond solving a problem, something that I like to think of is, it's not just solving or satisfying, it's actually delighting. I think there are a lot of businesses that solve problems. If I'm hungry, I can have that solved by going to, let's just say Wendy's. But if I want to be delighted, I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A. There's just some differences in delivery, and I think their understanding of their customer. So let's move on to the next one. I'm going to throw up a couple, or put up, a couple of resources, actually in the form of cartoons that come out of this awesome book called Talking to Humans. I recommend it to anyone. We use it as like a textbook for our researchers who think they want to start a business. And it's just super digestible. It's easy to get through in one sitting, and it's funny enough to keep you engaged. When we talk about understanding our customer, the reason we're wanting to do that is because we want to position our product or service in terms that they understand. And we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. One of the hard things for a researcher, there's a reason that some people stay in academia and that they like being in a lab, sometimes alone for hours on end. And so it's, a key lesson is you won't interact with any customers as long as you're in your lab. Now, in the era of COVID, it's hard even for extroverts to interact with their customers face to face, but there are ways to get around that. So you can take a look at these cartoons. They're like funny but true, you know. So we push our teams to go out and do 10 interviews a week, and to have 10 interactions with a prospective customer. And these are not, they're not sales pitches. And in fact, it's hard to get someone on the phone to do an informational interview if you go into it, or if they go into it thinking that it's a sales pitch. So we counsel our investigators, our researchers to, you know, you're there to learn, you're not there to teach. Again, that's sometimes a hard thing for somebody who's usually in a position of teaching. So nailing the connection between value proposition and I should pause. I don't see questions here. So Taylor, if you see questions, just let me know and I'll stop talking for a minute, but feel free to interrupt me at any point.
Yeah. And
yeah.
If anybody has them as well.
Awesome. So there is a process that we teach for actually identifying and validating problems that a customer might have. And again, in the appendix of this deck, I've got included these kind of step by step. But it's helpful. As I was reviewing it last night, it's helpful for anyone, even if we're experienced doing this, to kind of review, you know, how to do a good informational interview. And so we'll walk through here kind of some steps. So going into the interview, just having an understanding of why you want to be talking to this person, having put some thought into what you feel or we feel the perceived benefits are of our solution, and then rewriting those benefits as perceived pain points that they address. I liked last week's talk about framing questions to get to a no. I'm not saying that the right way, but I really like this, the psychological part of asking questions. I'm a big proponent, and it's hard for me. I've got 4 kids, and sometimes I don't want to ask open-ended questions because I don't have time for an open-ended answer. But they're the best form of questions if you really want to learn. Then they need to be open-ended questions. Okay, some questions coming in. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, so 5 whys, good example of a tool that you can use, just driving kind of to the root cause. Great. What we've found is helpful in our cohorts is to have our investigators or whoever's going to do the interview start with their list of the top 3 to 5 perceived pain points. And you go in and a simple question to get started is, you know, what are your top 3 pains? You know, you're an anesthesiologist in a busy practice or supporting a busy hospital. You know, what are your top 3 pains? It could be that they don't bring up anything that is on your perceived list, and that's, you know, might feel troubling. And so to reframe, maybe ask it a different way. You know, what makes your job difficult, or what's the hardest aspect of your job, or walk me through a day in the life, you know, and where are the friction points. And as they're providing this information, you know, make note of, are any of the problems that they're putting out there, are they in the list that we've put together? And you know, if you strike out, that's fine. You can ask kind of a leading question and say, you know, and this is a bit of a gray area, but hopefully you've talked to other people and they've validated one or two of your problems, but you could say, well, here's a list of 4 or 5 pains that your peers, mentioned. Do any of these resonate? And then can you prioritize those? And what we're looking for at the end of all of this is, do you care more about your solution, or do you care more about the pain and needs of a customer, and are you willing to pivot and make adjustments? So I'll give 2 quick examples. We had a researcher who had spent 30 years developing his technology, and had developed it in such a way that it was super accurate, and it was a feature was that it was you didn't move it around. It was I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, but not mobile. And as he and his team went out and did interviews, what they learned was the need was not great for it to be as accurate as they had thought. They were at the sub-micron level, and there was a level of good is good enough, and then another learning was the portability, and from site to site was important. That couldn't have been learned without actually getting out and talking to prospective customers. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll mention that at the end of any interview, any informational interview, 2 most important questions. One is, what did you expect me to ask that I didn't ask? Because people are expecting the interviewer to kind of set the agenda and to come up with the questions. Putting it back to the interviewee and asking them, is there anything that you wanted to cover that you expected me to ask and that we didn't? And that often creates, be prepared. That might open up a whole other, session of questions. The other critical question is, based on the conversation that we've had, would you recommend, or who would you recommend that I speak with to validate or better understand what we've covered? So just those 2 questions alone open up the door for more interviews and more learning. I'm going to jump in and look at the questions.
So Spencer, the question is from Theo there at the end. Aside from interview questions, does Pivot perform any product concept validation with observational research at this phase in the development process?
So if I understand the question, at this phase, it's more about the business model itself. Now, certainly the feedback, if we're talking about like usability and kind of user acceptance, at this point, we're encouraging and asking the investigator, the researcher, to not even show their technology, which is really hard for them to do. But and it's actually hard even for our office to manage, because what if part of the interview turns out that this technology that we've been investigating and that we've filed IP on is not what the customer needs? It's in our university environment, it's a little tricky sometimes, because to go back to the inventor, and hopefully it's the inventor that's doing this work, sometimes it's students doing it, but there's kind of you can't refute that. And so that's why I love these informational interviews, is because you're talking to the people who you think will be the ones that benefit from it. Well, let's believe them. So yeah, there's a whole other area of usability and hopefully I addressed that question. At this point, it's much earlier.
Spencer, one other comment in the chat from Tyler Gibbs. He's going into a customer interview right after this call. It might be interesting to do a case study with him and have you kind of go through what you would do in terms of coaching someone about a customer interview. So if Tyler's up for it, might be interesting for him to kind of ask some of the questions he's looking to validate in his customer interview, and then have you feedback on that if you are
Let's
open.
do it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's all feedback on it. I mean, while you're getting ready, Tyler, I put up these two cartoons that come from that Talking to Humans book, and nobody wants to tell you that your baby's ugly, so don't put them in a position where they need to. And that's one of the problems with jumping right into a demo, before doing an informational interview. As soon as you start showing them, now you've anchored them on this is what it is, and that might not be what it is, and based on our learnings, we want to make it better. So I think of that song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. If you want someone to love you, then I think you can do what this kid's doing and go talk to your parents and get that, and that's good. Yeah, go get some validation personally, but decouple. And this is another good thing is, if you have a relationship with the person you're interviewing, set the stage and decouple your friendship from the harsh reality that they might not like what you're working on, and just say, this has no, it seems silly, but this has no bearing on our friendship. I want to know, and I value your opinion, so let me have your opinion. But Tyler, yeah, what are some of the assumptions that you hope to validate in your customer interview today?
Actually, this is kind of later stage in an ongoing interview.
Okay.
And so it might not match very well what we've been talking about. I actually just jumped on the call, but because our customer is actually in the studio right now working with one of the engineers, and we'll be talking with her right after. We've been talking with this customers as well as about 15 of our other customers about the possibility of implementing a rewards program. Of course, when we brought up those ideas in the first place, we never even mentioned the rewards program. We were asking them questions to try and discover what motivates them to buy with similar things, similar price points as us. So we asked them where they shop, that has price tags around the same as we do, and we asked them how often they shop. We asked them what kind of what things those companies do, or what some of their favorite companies are that have similar price points, what they do that makes them feel valued, and the feedback that we got, a lot of it came back to rewards programs. Some people, a lot of the girls that we were working with were mentioning Forever 21 and their rewards program. So we looked into how their rewards program worked and everything. And actually what we're about to do is, now we have a customer who told us those things, and we had, this is now kind of the validation of of the information that we had gathered. We built a rewards program that we now kind of want to show and say, and this is someone that, has helped us a lot in building things and knows that we're not tied to anything, that we're tied more to solving her need. Anyway, so we're actually about to do an unveiling with her and see her reaction, ask her some questions along, is this something that matches what she expected? As she kind of was led to know that we were going to do a rewards thing. I talked to her earlier today. So yeah, I guess this is more of like a customer validation endpoint to interviews that have been ongoing for the past month.
Yeah, it's iterative. It's like invariably we'll have an inventor say, well, how could Apple have done customer interviews about the iPhone? And it's like, well, they didn't build the iPhone first, right? I mean, you look at the evolution and where it started from. They followed their customers' pains. and started, and I'm not going to go into the history, but did not, it didn't just drop in with the iPhone, because nobody, who would have said, yes, it's a pain that I can't send email from my phone. That wasn't even a thing, so thanks, Tyler. Good luck with that. It sounds like you're working at it right now, so you should go do that. But
Spencer, Jeff Holman made a comment, and Jeff, do you mind maybe just jumping in and kind of going over that comment?
Sure, that's not a problem. I apologize. I missed the first 10 minutes of this because I was taking a client call. But so if this was covered, just tell me to be quiet. But I work with a lot of inventors who are at the really early stage. In fact, that's who the call was. I got this idea, Jeff, and I want to create this new whatever it is, and how do I get it out there? And over the years, I've run into the issue that, and I've taken classes or workshops where people say you got to dig really deep into pain, and you got to validate the pain, the lean startup method before you ever make a product. And I think there's been a trend that I've seen towards moving more directly towards this is my product concept, will you buy it today, type of thing. So it's a split, and it's really hard to know which one to do and how to, and if there's a shift from what is the problem, is my business model right, to will you buy my product today if this is the product. It's really tough for inventors to make that shift and to handle both of those well, I think. So maybe you've got some thoughts on that, Spencer.
That's a great point. I think if you look at the evolution of being able to develop tools on the web or apps, it makes it much easier to get something into someone's hand and have them start using it. You see people throwing up landing pages and seeing if they can get people to put in their email address or get to the point that there's a shopping cart, and do they actually hit the button to put in their credit card information. And what I've seen is physical companies with actual physical products also getting into that space. So before they develop a new shoe, they'll throw an ad up of what they think the shoe is, and if enough people click on it, then they say, well, at some point we should build that. Or they'll throw up a blue shoe and a red shoe, and everyone clicks on the red shoe. So the web has made it a lot simpler to get some early validation, and I think that works with quite a few products. It's a little different maybe coming from a high tech or some might call it deep tech space, where it takes many years of development and maybe millions of dollars of development going into it. But the lessons learned, or that we try and share with our inventors, remain like, have contact and interaction with your potential or prospective end users early, so that you haven't developed in a vacuum. And I think generally, I don't know, I shouldn't say generally, there are companies that understand this and do this. It's very uncommon for a researcher or an inventor, and I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, to try and get into the head of the end user or the customer. And we haven't even talked today about the different types of customers and different people that need to weigh in and influence and actually pay for a product or service, and then this other dark figure, the saboteur, the people who could be that your product or service is actually going to eliminate the need for their job, and they're going to advocate within the company that it not be adopted. So yeah, great point. In our cohorts, and this is a busy slide, but from left to right, these are screenshots from the left. So on the left side, just it's a way to organize thoughts. We threw this into a Google form. There were other tools out there, and they were expensive, so we just recreated them in a Google form. And this was a way for the teams to organize their thoughts, but then at the cohort level, so that's where the middle and on the right-hand side, we as the cohort leads could see, you know, who's actually doing interviews and, you know, what elements of their business model canvas are they validating, or do they think that their interviews are driving towards. And it's really fun, you know, after 2 or 3 weeks of this, the peer pressure that gets created. So if you ever want to really jump in and validate your idea, or you have a new idea, doing it in a cohort with a cohort lead, and I don't know how you would do this, maybe I'll do it someday, but it's fun because it creates peer pressure. When the expectation is that everyone's going to go out and interview 10 customers a week for 8 weeks, which is a lot, and you show up after 1 week and you're this sliver in blue, it's really fun to see that team squirm. And it's fun to see the teams that are doing well. What happens is, as we go through the various elements of the business model canvas, we encourage, force the teams to frame their answers to any question in terms of the customer told me. And you know, rather than saying, you know, I think, or, you know, we read, or, you know, we found, no, if the only answers that we accept are I don't know yet, or the customer told me. And it after they've done enough of these interviews, there's this level of confidence that comes, because it's not I think, it's I talked to 8 people and 7 of them said this. And that creates a lot of confidence going out and talking to investors also. I mean, Taylor and I, and I'm sure others on this call, have sat in rooms where companies are pitching, and then a question comes up about, well, how do you know that? And the team that can say, or the founder that can say, I talked to 150 prospective customers, and then they throw up a slide of, you know, here are my findings and everything. That's a powerful answer. So,
Spencer, I have a question, maybe
yes.
one of the last questions, but in terms of our timing. But Priscilla asked, how do you validate or select who you're calling so you know it is already the right target? So do you mind talking about how you in the past have helped teams know who to call, how to identify them, how to find their contact information, some of those tools that you've used to do that work?
Yeah, so that's a good question. What we find is if you're going to end up doing 70 or 80 interviews, the first, and this is a really hard thing to get through, the first third of those interviews are wasted, is probably a little too strong of a word, but not fruitful, because you don't oftentimes what you're learning with those first 20 or 30 interviews is that you're not very good at asking questions, and you didn't actually get the right person in front of you. And so it's hard to you know, to get through those interviews, but just knowing that the best interviews don't come until you're like 20 or 30 into it. Getting to those people, LinkedIn is awesome. Like if you just, you know, put the post out there that, hey, and I've seen Brian has done this, you know, hey, I'm working on this thing and, you know, looking for some feedback. That's a great way. I mean, anyone that comments or likes it, message them directly.
I'd also say, to add to that, Spencer, sorry to step on it, is to say, you look like someone who might be involved with this. Do you know of anyone else who might be able to provide this kind of feedback? Because that leads them to the point of thinking about their network, but also then they return to you saying, well, I can help. You know, it changes it from being a, I want you to do this for me, to a, if you know of anyone who can, and gives them the opportunity to present themselves or not. You know, it's kind of a very polite way to approach it. I felt like that's how I've had success.
Yeah, I really like that. I guess a final comment on how to be objective. It's hard. It's hard for anyone that knows something so well to not want to show it, not want to sell it, not want to talk about how amazing it is. But again, the purpose is not validation of me and my background in education. The purpose is to validate, that this is a useful tool that can not only satisfy, but delight a prospective customer. So maybe I'll end there, Taylor. And if there's other questions, as I said, I threw a couple of links and other resources, and then I put in a kind of the step-by-step for how we walk people through doing one of those customer validation or problem identification and validation interviews.
Awesome. Thanks. We'll send this presentation out to the group so that you have these slides as well. But thanks for your time, Spencer, and for presenting on this. This was fantastic. And thanks everyone for your questions and comments. I think we'll wrap up for today and look forward to seeing everybody next week, and look for some emails with this presentation as well as speakers or the presenter for next week. So thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you.